end of Roe. The U.S. Supreme Court strikes down the landmark 1973 decision that legalized abortion in America. We have team coverage tonight, including reports from outside the Supreme Court, the White House, and reaction from the pro-life movement on a historic day in the fight for the unborn. Trip to Canada. The Vatican releases the itinerary for the Holy Father's highly anticipated trip next month. And home as a vocation. The World Meeting of Families touches upon the sorrows, joys, and high calling of family life. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, June 24th, 2022. An end to Roe versus Wade in America. Today, the Supreme Court struck down the landmark 1973 ruling that legalized abortion in the United States. Thank you so much for being with us tonight on this solemnity of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. I'm Tracy Sable. It will now be up to individual states to decide on whether to allow or prohibit abortions. On this historic day, we have team coverage. Owen Jensen brings us reaction from the White House. We also have Supreme Court analysis and pro-life reaction. But we start outside of the High Court with Erik Rosales.
Well, good evening, Tracy. You know, the crowd has certainly grown out here since the decision came down just after 10 o'clock. It's been a relatively peaceful protest. Both for and against the abortion issue have been out here yelling and letting their voices be heard. But so far, police have said no arrests have taken place. And so far, it has been very, very, very peaceful. Now, this is a monumental ruling, one that could have implications throughout the nation. By a vote of 63, the justices have decided to overturn Roe.
Thank you, God, for what you've done.
Reaction to the decision was swift on both sides of the abortion debate.
We've been praying here for almost 18 years, praying God end abortion, send revival. And so for us, this is a massively monumental case because this brings liberty and freedom to those that have no voice.
This is going to hurt many women around the world, in our country, especially women in low-income areas who don't have the resources that they're able to get abortions.
This is a huge barrier that we just broke today in the pro-life movement because now we have the ability to abolish abortion, not only abolish it, but make it unthinkable.
In the majority opinion, Justice Samuel Alito wrote, quote, "Abortion presents a profound moral question. The Constitution does not prohibit the citizens of each state from regulating or prohibiting abortion." Former U.S. Ambassador for International Religious Freedom Sam Brownback tells me this decision is a long time coming.
Finally, we've got a court courageous enough to turn this issue back to the people and the state legislatures. That's where it should have stayed. That's where it should have been. That's where it now goes back to.
On Capitol Hill, self-proclaimed Catholic Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi chastised the decision.
This is deadly serious. But we are not going to let this pass. A woman's right to choose, reproductive freedom, is on the ballot in November.
While pro-life lawmakers praised it.
My hope, my prayer is that America will reclaim our identity as a nation whose God-given rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for all.
House Pro-Life Caucus Chair Congressman Chris Smith tells me now the real work begins, especially with Democrats wanting to pass their abortion on demand bill.
That's their big push. So that is an existential threat to the lives and the well-being of unborn children and equally to their mothers.
The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops praised today's decision, saying in part that Roe has resulted in the deaths of tens of millions of preborn children, generations that were denied the right to even be born. Now, House Leader Kevin McCarthy said, especially with today's decision, that the justices need to be protected. He is now calling on the Attorney General to apply the laws that are already in place to keep them protected. Outside the Supreme Court, Erik Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
President Joe Biden had nothing on his public schedule today. Then the ruling on Dobbs came, and suddenly the Catholic but pro-abortion president announced that he would deliver remarks. He called it, quote, a sad day for the court and for the country. White House correspondent Owen Jensen continues our team coverage. Owen?
Tracy, President Joe Biden and his administration have supported expanding unfettered abortion access from the very start, rescinding the Mexico City policy, rejecting the Hyde Amendment, trying to codify Roe v. Wade into law, and denouncing pro-life laws designed to save unborn lives. And today he went before the cameras slamming the justices.
A visibly angered President Joe Biden reacts to Roe getting tossed.
Now, with Roe gone, let's be very clear. The health and life of women in this nation are now at risk.
And he blasted his predecessor.
It was 3 justices named by 1 president, Donald Trump, who were the core of today's decision to upend the scales of justice.
During his term, President Donald Trump appointed 3 Supreme Court justices, Amy Coney Barrett, Brett Kavanaugh, Neil Gorsuch, all joining in the decision to strike down Roe. Today's outcome is expected to lead to abortion bans in roughly half the states. Former President Trump releasing this statement, today's decision, which is the biggest win for life in a generation, along with other decisions that have been announced recently, were only made possible because I delivered everything as promised, including nominating and getting 3 highly respected and strong constitutionalists confirmed to the United States Supreme Court. It was my great honor to do so. I did not cave to the radical left Democrats. The Republican National Committee releasing this statement on what they call a victory for life. This historic ruling rightfully returns power to the American people to enact laws that protect unborn children and support mothers everywhere. As this debate now returns to the states and the American people, we know there is still much work ahead. Meantime, President Biden denounced violence and intimidation, imploring this:
to keep all protests peaceful. Peaceful. Peaceful, peaceful. No intimidation. Violence is never acceptable.
Now, in his speech, the president took another swipe, saying the conservative majority of the court shows how extreme it is. After his speech, reporters shouted questions, but he turned his back and walked out. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
And joining us now is Carrie Severino, president of the Judicial Crisis Network. Carrie, welcome back. Great to be with you today. A lot to get to, but first, your reaction to the decision.
Yeah, this is an amazing day to see that we finally, after so many years and so much work, have a court where a majority of the justices are willing to enforce the Constitution as written, to stand up against those who want to just invent rights that are not there, and to do so in the face of really unprecedented hostility after this leak. You know, I think the intention of the leak was to create the kinds of increasingly violent and threatening riots and disturbances we're seeing at the court and even in front of the justices' own homes. We saw even an attempted assassination, and the fact that they're still willing to stand up for what they know is the correct constitutional decision. That is a huge victory for the rule of law.
Absolutely. And Carrie, can you walk us through this ruling that not only overturned Roe versus Wade, but also Planned Parenthood of Southeastern PA versus Casey?
Yeah, and really Planned Parenthood versus Casey itself effectively rewrote Roe. So that was the real governing law left, even though Roe obviously was what started it all. This case was so clear. Instead of trying to, what sometimes the court does is they say, well, we're not really fully overturning this, but they effectively change everything it stands for. Here, they just said, look, there is no right to abortion in the Constitution. Roe and Casey are overturned. They left it very clear. They pointed out that, yes, we follow precedent in most cases, but when a case is so egregiously wrong, and these cases are absolutely egregiously wrong, when they disrupt all of these other areas of law. So there's so many other areas where fetal life is protected, but somehow they have to sit uneasily with this case that says, yes, but a mother actually can kill her unborn child, even though, if someone else attacked her and killed it, would be protected by law. So many reasons that the court said this is one of those cases where you have to go back and just reconsider the precedent, say, you know what, let's start from scratch because we have to ultimately follow what the Constitution says. They were very clear this doesn't imply all of the parade of horribles the left is saying. This isn't going to affect a lot of these other decisions, whether it be about contraception or about same-sex marriage or other areas. It's really limited to abortion, and it's going to do is put this issue back in the state. So this is taking the court out of this business, but it's certainly not the last word for the pro-life movement, because now we'll be talking to state legislatures, make sure our state judges are interpreting their state constitutions faithfully. And I think there will be some role for federal legislation as well. So all of those will work together to help battle out really what American abortion policy is going to look like.
Yeah, and Carrie, as you mentioned, this now goes back to the states. But what about those states with trigger laws? Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, so there are some states that had laws before Roe. For example, Texas, that had a law that was overturned in Roe versus Wade. Those laws now come back to life, and some people call it trigger laws or springing laws. There are some states that have passed laws intentionally to try to get them so that they said, well, right now we know we can't pass a law protecting life, but we know that I think there's about 13 states that have these laws that once Roe is overturned, then those laws go into effect. And so in those states, now that Roe is overturned, a few of them you have to wait like 5 days or 30 days. But then at that point, their law protecting life will come into effect. All of them look a little different. They might have different exceptions or qualifications involving the life of the mother or things. But those laws will then come into effect. And then there's other states, unfortunately, like Californians and the New Yorks of the world, that are going to continue having abortion virtually up to the moment of birth. And so this is going to look very different depending on where in the country you are.
Yeah, Carrie, we probably have maybe about a minute or so left, but I do want to talk to you about this. As you know, President Biden spoke earlier today and said in part today's ruling was a tragic error by the court. He also said that this is not over, and he called on Congress to make Roe versus Wade federal law. I want to get your thoughts on all that.
Yeah, that's a shame from a president who used to be consider himself pro-life and obviously still considers himself Catholic. So to be advancing some of these policies, the Senate had and the Congress had a bill about abortion. It was incredibly radical. It went way beyond merely codifying Roe to take away all conscience rights and many other, just simple abortion restrictions that were in place before. So we'll see whether they try to do that. I would optimistic that the Senate will be able to block that type of extreme legislation and make sure that the American people still have a voice, because we know that most Americans, even if they say they like Roe, don't really want what it stands for. They don't want 9 months of virtually unrestricted abortion. They want to be able to protect fetal life, and I think that's hopefully what we'll end up seeing. But certainly the Biden administration is doing everything they can to stop that.
Well, Carrie, thank you so much for coming on today. Great to be with you.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Coming up, more reaction to the overturning of Roe versus Wade, including what comes next in the fight for the unborn. A new report says that since 2016, pro-life pregnancy centers have saved more than 800,000 lives. The study comes from the pro-life Charlotte Lozier Institute. It says the centers provide support, education, medical care, and critical resources for women faced with an unexpected pregnancy. Pro-life leaders are reacting to the Supreme Court decision. Bishop Michael Burbidge from the Diocese of Arlington in Virginia says in part, quote, "We thank God for this welcome decision. At the same time, we also know that the work of protecting unborn children and their parents from the tragedy of abortion is far from finished." Heritage Foundation President Kevin Roberts calls today's decision a new beginning, saying, quote, "Now is the time for state lawmakers to protect life, which begins at conception. Congress also has an obligation at the federal level to protect the unborn." And joining us now is another pro-life leader, Jeanne Mancini, president of the March for Life. Jeanne, welcome back. So good to see you today. I'm curious, what was your first reaction when you heard about the decision today, coincidentally, on Nellie Gray's birthday, the founder of the March for Life?
You know what? It was just pure Joy. I mean, and gratitude to God, who we know really was behind this decision, and gratitude to all of the people who've marched over the years. I mean, so many of your viewers, I thought, and I have been thinking a lot in the last few weeks about just the marchers, like every single year marching past that Supreme Court, hours and hours, shoulder to shoulder, and how their example and their witness to the dignity of the unborn person has made today possible by God's grace.
Yeah, it is incredible. I know you were outside the Supreme Court today. What was the scene like there, and what was the reaction to the news from pro-lifers?
So I was outside the Supreme Court very early this morning, but when the decision came down, I was in my office here. But I can tell you that early in the morning, it was very contentious already. There was just a lot of yelling, between, a lot of threats of violence and just a lot of anger from the other side, and pro-lifers engaging them as lovingly and prayerfully as possible. So I think that we're going to see a lot of that for the next few days, a lot of fear mongering and extremism, as a response to this. And I think it's just critical that we remember that life is about love, and that love saves lives, and that God has this, and that we continue to be just examples of peace and love to all that we encounter.
Yeah, and although Roe versus Wade has been overturned, as we know, that really doesn't mean abortion has been abolished. Jeanne, what happens next for the pro-life movement?
Yeah, so if you'll humor me, I've been thinking so much about this beautiful Winston Churchill quote, which came from World War II after the Battle of El Alamein, which was, someone asked him, do you think that this is the end? And he said, no, it's not the end. And I don't think it's the beginning of the end, but perhaps it's the end of the beginning. And that's kind of been my mantra lately. I think it's the end of the beginning. We're going to have to move into phase 2 here, which will involve a lot more work at the states, which the March for Life is very engaged. We were just in California 2 days ago for our second annual March for Life there. And we're going to need to increase our safety net for women and babies, and so I'm hearing all sorts of beautiful stories, especially from the church. One example in Gaithersburg, Maryland, where that church, St. John Newman, wants to make sure that no woman facing an unexpected pregnancy in Gaithersburg is lacking support to choose life. So we're going to really need to bolster what we're already doing, where there is a lot that we're already doing, but bolster what's already happening.
Yeah, something else I want to talk about, Jeanne. President Biden spoke earlier today addressing the Supreme Court ruling. And one of the things he said was, quote, the health and life of women in this nation are now at risk. I want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's fear mongering, and it's unfortunate that he's doing that. He's politicizing this. So very rarely is a pregnancy impacting the mom's health in a negative kind of way. And I think that they're trying to use that as sort of a small example. But even the Guttmacher Institute says that something like 6% of the abortions have to do with the health of the mom or the baby. But the more important thing is that abortion is not health care. When a woman is pregnant, there are 2 patients there. And that's what being pro-life is about, is loving both patients and receiving them with welcome and wanting the health of both patients, mom and baby. And so, President Biden, who's flip-flopped on this issue, we have a picture of him from many years ago in the Delaware State House when he was pro-life. And it's sad that he would lean into this on such a day.
Yeah, and before I let you go, we're running out of time, but I do want to ask you this. Now that Roe versus Wade has been overturned, what's the future of the March for Life?
Yeah, well, there's no lack of work to be done. So we are very active in our states. We were just in California, as I mentioned 2 days ago. We're in 5 states this year. So we've done 3 now, and we'll be in Pennsylvania for the second annual march in September, and then Ohio in October. Next year, we plan to double that, and in the next 5 to 6 years to be in all states. But that national march is still going to be really important. So I've been asked a lot, will we change the date, this, that, the other? I can tell you this January, for the 50th anniversary of Roe, which thanks God will be no more, we will be marching. We will march in commemoration of the loss of life of 63 million Americans to abortion, but also commemoration of all who've gone before us to make today possible, this new season.
Yeah, and Jeannie, thank you so much for your time today and being with us on this historic day. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Up next, a report from Rome with insights from day 3 of the World Meeting of Families. Lawmakers in Germany have voted to end a ban on advertising abortions. Under previous laws, doctors faced a fine or a prison sentence if convicted. Abortion is forbidden by law in Germany, but is not punished if carried out in the first 12 weeks of pregnancy. The Vatican has released the details for the Holy Father's trip to Canada next month. His schedule includes meetings with Indigenous peoples and with officials from Canada's government. A papal apology is expected for past abuses in Catholic-run residential schools. The Holy Father's visit is set for July 24th through the 29th. And finally tonight, the third day of the World Meeting of Families today opened with Mass inside of St. Peter's Basilica. The theme of the day was vocations. The schedule featured conferences where families discussed being Christians in the digital age and also the identity and missions of Christian parents and children. Joining us now from Rome is Kelsey Wicks, Interim Executive Director of Catholic News Agency. Kelsey, great to see you. Thank you so much for your time today. A lot to get to with those events in Rome. But first, some big news out of the United States with Roe versus Wade being overturned. I'd like to get your reaction and what has been the reaction in Rome?
Tracy, thank you for asking. What a historic day for the United States and for the world. The bells of St. Peter's were serendipitously ringing out as the decision was announced during our live coverage of the 10th World Meeting of Families here in Rome. And the reaction was one of great relief, just extreme preparedness for what needs to come next, and a small amount of celebration. Catholics have been working, the Church has been working for the cause of life since its inception on the cross of Jesus Christ, and we're just all so pleased today to be here for this historic moment.
Yeah, absolutely, it is historic. I want to go back now to the global gathering in Rome while you're there. After 3 days of this event, what have been the highlights so far?
I think the breadth of the stories, the testimonies from families has been the highlight. The cumulative effect of, families who are struggling to recover their marriages, grandparents deeply involved in their faith, the transparency and vulnerability of many couples and families talking about the crisis that the family is suffering, and these families in particular have walked through by the grace of the sacrament of marriage. So it's been cumulatively just a refreshing look at the beauty of what the sacraments can do to transform married life.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, what stood out to you? I know families are being talked about through many perspectives. Is there maybe one aspect that specifically stood out to you?
Yes, when the parents of Chiara Corbella got up and talked about their daughter, whose cause is now open for canonization, she lived an incredibly trying life through her marriage, her short life. She died after the birth of their third child. The first two children were born, and she and her husband were able to baptize them, and then they had to say goodbye within 30 minutes of their birth. So she lost two children, and then she found out she was pregnant with her third, Francesco. And she found out at the same time that she had cancer. She refused the treatments in order to save Francesco's life. And then her husband had to say goodbye to her after saying goodbye to their two previously born children. And so the testimony of those parents, having lived next to a saint, having grown a saint, a possible saint, I should say, was incredibly moving.
Absolutely. It sounds so profound. We're running out of time, Kelsey, but I'm curious, can you give us maybe a preview of what we can expect this weekend?
Well, I think this weekend there's going to be a great closing mass, and the Pope plans to address the pilgrims finally on Sunday. I think right now pilgrims from America are lighting candles in St. Peter's Basilica and enjoying the moment of the overturning of Roe versus Wade. I can't imagine that won't be talked about by the Holy Father, but he is a bit unpredictable, so we shall see if that makes headlines in the coming days, but it certainly is causing waves throughout the church right now.
Well, Kelsey, thank you so much for being with us today and speaking to us about all of this. We appreciate it. And we thank you for watching tonight. Stay with EWTN News for the latest in the overturning of Roe versus Wade. I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.